It was during my third deployment to Iraq. The platoon had taken up residence in 2 houses in a village several miles south of Haditha. One day I heard our translator having a heated discussion with 2 local men. I grabbed my gear and my rifle and walked out to the road to investigate. I asked the translator what was going on. He tells me that these 2 men are crazy and assures me that they are not dangerous. I ask what they want, and he mumbles about them being superstitious or something along those lines. He assures me that everything is okay and my attention is not needed. It took a bit of prying, but the translator finally says that they are having a wolfman problem. But they are afraid that if they shoot at it, the local troops will be alarmed and attack their house. They tell us that this wolfman has been coming around late at night and has already killed a few sheep. And they are worried that it's going to start attacking their family. So I assume somewhere in translation the word dog has turned into wolf and is somehow being conveyed to me by the translator as wolfman. So I try to clarify, do they mean a dog? The translator is a bit hesitant, almost like he's embarrassed that his countrymen are wasting everyone's time by believing in such nonsense. But they are adamant that their house is being besieged by a wolfman. Again, I ask if it's just a big dog, and no, it's a wolfman. I ask if there are wolves in Iraq, and they are all in agreement that yes, there are wolves in Iraq. But there are no wolves in this part of the country, and it's not a wolf or a large dog that has been killing their sheep. It's a wolfman. The translator is trying to usher them away, but at this point, I am very intrigued and still a bit confused over the whole dog-wolf-wolfman thing. So I ask them to describe what they are seeing. They tell me that every few nights it comes around. They first see it on 4 legs, as it skulks around their small compound. But then it stands up like a man, walking on 2 legs. It growls and it has lunged at the men, but as they retreat, it turns its attention to the sheep, their own dogs refusing to help protect human or sheep. They tell me the creature has killed a few of their sheep, and that they have even found one of the bodies, ripped apart with portions of it eaten away. They have been hesitant to shoot for fear of troop involvement. The translator says that he has heard of such a creature, and even though this type of story has been spread through the area by various people, it is no more than superstitions and delusions. He assures me that there is no such thing as a wolfman. I tell the 2 men that they should feel free to protect themselves and their livestock. And with my interest piqued, I get the men to agree to allowing us to stop by from time to time and set up an observation post while we are out on patrol. A couple nights later, I join a night patrol and we head towards the house. We are greeted by one of the men, and he gives us entry to the compound. We go up to the roof and set out sentries to overlook a nearby bridge. About an hour later, the homeowner comes up with a panicked look on his face. He's talking really fast, excitement and concern in his voice and body language. He's wanting me to come with him. I tell 2 others to come with me and we all follow the man. He leads us to the other side of the house and we exit onto an enclosed courtyard where the sheep are being kept. The sheep are making plenty of noise and the man is pointing to a dark corner of the yard. I strain my eyes to see what he's pointing at. Finally I see it, a large wolf dog just standing in the corner. I ask the other 2 guys with me if they see it too, and they both agree that it's a wolf or a dog. It moved behind a small sections on of wall and I could hear popping and cracking noises, like joints or knuckles being cracked. When it stepped out from behind the wall, it was upright on 2 legs. It swiftly and effortlessly jumped the perimeter wall and we could hear it running away on 2 feet. I conveyed to the man as best I could, if that thing ever showed up again, feel free to shoot it if he could, and if he did, to please let me know. There was a small village about an hour's drive outside of Haditha. It had probably 20 homes in it. We went there to search for a bomb maker. We cordoned off the village, and when we cleared it out, we found our guy under a stack of like 10 of those floor mats they would all lay on. For those of you not in the know, imagine a super shitty mattress. They would spread them all out on the floor at night, sleep, and stack them during the day. Anyways, he was hiding under them. We pulled him out of the house and he wasn't too excited, as we were kind of wrestling him into the 7-ton. What we all believed was his mother went insane, like possessed. She was screaming and flinging dirt on her face and ripping her clothes. She pointed at each of us, and I swear to God put a curse on us. Of my buddies there, every single one of us still has insane a nightmare with this Iraqi lady in it. The dreams are extremely real, and each of us wakes up in cold sweats and feel paralyzed. This was over 15 years ago. I have yet to explore this one with my shrink Brad. My dad's stories. He served in the Taiwanese Marines as a drill sergeant. Much of the ground in Taiwan saw violence under occupation, and it was rumored his base was built on or near a mass grave. Needless to say, he's had a few paranormal stories. He had a guy report to him in the morning exhausted, but frazzled the night before he had been on guard duty, overlooking the firing range. The targets on the range were a mix of clay and wood figures, cut and drawn to look like an enemy soldier, aiming a rifle at you. According to the guard, when he'd been bored out of his mind staring out over the range, he saw clear as day one of the clay soldiers wearily lay down his rifle and exclaim, "Damn, I'm tired." The guard said he passed out from fright. During the evening, when training was over, the sergeants for the most part had the time to themselves. My dad liked to go snake hunting during dusk, when the heat was rising from the ground, and the snakes came out of their holes. So one evening he sets out carrying a bag, a nice long stick, and a flashlight. As he was making his way across the field, zigzagging in a search pattern, he found himself getting closer and closer to an old decrepit outhouse that had been abandoned as it was too far from the main base. As he got within a few yards of it, he was hit with a sudden feeling of apprehension. Something told him going near the outhouse was a bad idea. At that moment, his flashlight aimed right at the construct went out. He fiddled with the battery, smacked it, thought, "Fuck, better get a new battery," and turned around to head back. The moment he turned and faced the main base, the flashlight flickered back on. Great, time to keep hunting. The moment he turned to face the outhouse, it flickered off again. Faced the base, it flickered on. He did this 2 or 3 times, got the message, verbally apologized for intruding, turned and walked calmly back to base. The base itself was surrounded by forest and mountains, the natural terrain of Taiwan. One day, a soldier was reported missing. As the day went on, it was clear that he'd either deserted or was in serious trouble. A manhunt rescue team was organized, and most of the base was out searching for the guy as the rain started to come in. As night fell, they called it off and got ready to try again tomorrow. They found him in the morning, huddled in a wet, dark cave, scared, speechless, and out of his mind. No one was sure what he saw to cause him to freak out, and they never found out. They shipped the guy out soon afterwards. Finally, one of his years on the base, it was hit with a huge typhoon. Typhoons are pretty regular in Taiwan, especially during the summer, but this one was going to set records. Everyone hunkered down and reinforced the base as best they could, and it held well, and after days of relentless rain and wind, they emerged to survey the damage. One of the trees on base had been hundreds of years old. It sat on a hill and overlooked the base, and so had been the site of a Buddhist shrine set at its roots. Now the roots twisted and turned into the air. The storm had torn the tree from the ground, and yet the shrine itself was untouched. Even the red silk covering, with nothing weighing it down, hadn't moved an inch despite the winds that had finally torn the great tree from its hill, after hundreds of years. The soldiers took this as a sign that despite whatever would be thrown against them, their spirit would remain strong and unmoved. Submariner here. There are few things as unnerving as wondering about the engine room from 2330 SO 530 alone on watch. When the boat is largely shut down in port, it becomes a very quiet place. The roving watches usually make it an hourly game to speed through their log rounds, especially in the lower levels. One particular in port period, the boat was moored in Pearl Harbor, and a few people started complaining about a real uneasy feeling. I was on the mid-watch as the senior chief came back to do his required 0300 tour. We saw him walk past maneuvering on his way to Shaft Alley. This particular senior chief was the crusty old salt type, and would usually spend a bit of time just sitting in the lower levels of the engine room alone and contemplate life. So we expected as much. What we didn't expect was him to literally run into the maneuvering area a few minutes later. The man was pale-faced and breathing heavily. We sat up straight, our eyes as wide as his, thinking we were about to have to announce and fight some ship casualty. He slumps into the chair. A few tense and silent moments go by. We're on pins and needles. He finally opens his mouth and tells us about the fucking ghost in Shaft Alley. Swears a sailor passes by him as he's sitting on a trash can in Shaft Alley. His first response was to call out to the guy, see who it was. But then he realized this guy isn't dressed right. He describes what this guy was wearing, the old World War II naval uniforms. So he quickly gets up to catch up to the guy, and he does. The guy turns towards the senior chief, looks right at him, then turns away and literally walks through ass end of the boat. It's now that the senior chief decides it's time to leave Shaft Alley, and promptly does so. Swears up and down that he knows what he saw. I sure as hell wasn't about to leave maneuvering that night to find out for myself. I was in the US Navy and worked in communications. I was a supervisor on my watch and enjoyed working the night tours while on deployment. We stood 12-hour watches from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Around 2 a.m. I hear some chatter over the internal speaker system used between a few different stations on the ship. It's the bridge asking combat if they see anything on surface or air radar, maybe 10 miles out to our west. Combat returns with a negative, and I don't think anything of it. About 15 minutes goes by and the bridge asks again, and asks are they sure there's nothing there. Then they ask us if we have any message traffic about any ships in the area, aircraft or anomalous weather patterns. I ask one of the guys on watch to perform the request, and now my interest is piqued. I walk out of the comm center and head up to the bridge. I was on a frigate, so the walk was quick, and I get up there and ask what's going on. One of my buddies points me over to the port side and we walk over. There's about 5 or 6 circular-shaped lights about 10 to 15 miles out in the clouds, pretty large. They aren't moving or flying around, but just looking stable. These lights are also casting lights downward on the ocean, and you can see the light refracting back at the water. From what we could see, it didn't appear to be lights shining up from the water, because they wouldn't pass through the clouds. The clouds also weren't super thick. It was lightly overcast, and it was the middle of the night with no other light pollution on the water. There was nothing in message traffic about any ships, submarines, or aircraft in the area. We were hundreds of miles from land, and the last report of any unusual weather patterns was a water spout a few hundred miles away. We tried to take pictures with our onboard digital camera, using a long exposure, but we couldn't capture the phenomenon. After about 90 minutes, the light slowly faded and then completely disappeared. I'm sure there's some sort of weather or atmospheric condition for what we saw, but for all intents and purposes, it fit the description of a UFO, unidentified flying object.